If you've ever run Facebook ads and felt like you were getting nothing but tire kicker spam and people wanting retail prices, this video is for you. Most people like to blame Facebook for the reason that they're getting low quality leads when they're running Facebook ads. But the truth is, the lead quality is almost always determined by one of two things: the ads that you run and the friction that you add to the process. And if either one is wrong, then your quality can tank. We'll start by talking about the types of ads that you're running. Generally speaking, if you're running the generic Facebook ads that you typically see when you're just scrolling, right? The we buy houses fast, the we buy, sell your house fast, those types. You are targeting a very broad audience, right? And the types of leads that you will generate, you will get a handful of motivated sellers, right? But you'll also get a lot of just curious sellers or sellers exploring their options. If you really think about it, when you run those types of ads, right, you're not really calling out a specific type of audience. You're just making a broad statement that, very attractive claims that you can close on a house fast. You'll close on it with cash. There won't be, any inconveniences of, fixing up the house or, hosting showings or, letting everybody, see that, letting the world know that you're actually selling your house, right? And this is a big reason why a lot of the leads that you'll likely get running these types of ads are just low quality, people that are looking for retail value because, people are smart, right? And if there's somebody out there that, is interested in selling their home and they're considering, listening with an agent, but, they're scrolling on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and they see an ad come up, claiming that, they can, buy their house cash in 30 days, as is, no repairs, no closing costs, all the promises that we make, right? Obviously it's attractive to them. And again, people are smart and, they're going to explore their options. And if they're looking for top dollar, for their home, they're going to exhaust every effort that they can to keep every dollar in their pocket, as a result of the sale. And the ultimate issue is that you're kind of mixing the audience that you're targeting, right? The audience that you're looking for is actually, motivated sellers who need a quick sale, right? And again, you will get some of those, but also targeting, unintentionally people that are just interested in selling their home or curious, but not necessarily motivated, right? So you'll attract both of those types of sellers when you run these generic ads. And there's two core ways to fix this issue, right? And there's one core solution. The first issue that we were talking about is the fact that you're running generic ads. Instead of running generic ads, what you should do is you should be running targeted ads. And when I say targeted, I mean you should be calling out specific types of motivation in the ads that you're running, right? And each ad should call out one type of motivation, right? So that, when somebody sees your ad, the only time that they will actually fill out that ad is if, they can relate to whatever type of motivation that you're calling out in that specific ad, right? So if you think about the common types of motivation, we're looking for as investors and wholesalers, right? We're looking for inherited properties, vacant homes, people that are downsizing, tired landlords, people that are going through financial distress, talk about code violations, major repairs, those kind of things, right? If you have ads that are calling out, a specific type of motivation, only those people are going to fill out those ads. You're not going to get, somebody that's looking to sell their house for, top dollar and their house is in, tip top shape and, they don't really have any reason to sell other than, hey, I want the extra money, I want the extra cash out of my equity kind of thing, right? So running ads where you're calling out one specific type of motivation will make sure that, the people that are filling out that ad can actually relate to whatever motivation you're calling out. And, at minimum, that seller will come through with some level of motivation, right? They may not be coming, out the gate asking for 50% of, their home value. But, that's part of why we have, sales processes in place and, we have different things that we can do to work on that. But again, the whole goal of running ads and doing marketing is to, generate motivated seller leads, and then, take them through your sales process, and, hopefully convert them into a contract and eventually a closed deal. So, marketing is just the first step of it. And, we want, high quality leads, high intent leads, people that are motivated and that are ready to make a decision now, right? And running those targeted ads will give you the best opportunity to generate those types of seller leads. Other than the actual ads that you're running, another big reason that a lot of people get, tire kicker leads is ultimately they make it too easy for the prospect to submit their information. And we'll kind of, break that down a little bit. When you're running Facebook ads, there's a couple different places that you can send your traffic to, right? If somebody is scrolling on Facebook or Instagram, they see your ad, they click on it, two things can happen. One thing is that, you can send them to an instant form, which is basically just like a Facebook lead form, or you can send them to a landing page, which is like your website, right? And the most common issue that I see when people are complaining about, poor lead quality, spam leads, tire kicker leads, when running Facebook ads, is that they're sending their traffic to a Facebook instant form where all they're doing is asking for their contact information, right? And sure, like, it's low friction, it doesn't, there's not much that the seller has to do to fill out the information. It's going to get you a lot of leads. It'll get you a really low cost per lead. But the issue is that when you only ask for contact information in a Facebook instant form, the prospect can just autofill all of their contact information, right? So they'll click on your ad, the instant form will pop up, they click the autofill button, and they click submit. So in 3 clicks, right, they've submitted all of their information. And, I think the core issue behind that is, yeah, sure, you'll get a lot of leads, you'll get a lot of cheap leads, right? But the core issue is, there may be a disconnect somewhere in what's going on, right? When I first started running Facebook ads, years back, this is how I used to generate leads. I would run the ads, I would send the traffic to an instant form and just collect contact information. And I used to get all kind of leads, right? I get spam leads, I get, people asking to rent homes from me. I get people asking to buy homes from me, right? But, that's not what we're looking for, right? We're looking for people that are actually, motivated to sell their homes. So ultimately the way to fix this issue is to add friction to the process of them submitting their information to you. All right, the 2 ways that we can add friction to the process so that we're filtering out the tire kickers and the spam leads are asking qualifying questions when we're using the Facebook instant forms, or we can just send the traffic to a landing page. And I'll kind of talk about the instant forms first, and then we'll talk about the landing page. But when you're using the instant forms, typically, what I'll do is ask 5 to 7 qualifying questions and require them to fill out each one, right? So this is going to be questions like, there's a property listed, what condition is the property in, who's living in the property, what's your reason for selling, the timeline. So the common questions that we'll ask, and I'll ask a seller over the phone as we're qualifying them, we want to throw in like 5 to 7 of those questions. Back to the idea of adding friction, right? At a high level, if somebody is willing to jump through, all these hoops, answer all these questions and fill out all this information for us, right? The idea is like, if they're willing to go through all of this just to, book a phone call with us to discuss selling their house, there's probably some level of motivation, right? If it were super easy for them to fill it out, there's no inconvenience, added to the process, right? So with the lack of inconvenience, right, they can just click on a couple buttons and come through as a lead, book a phone call, ultimately waste our time. But if we make them jump through hoops just to talk through us, and they're still willing to jump through all those hoops to talk to us, there's probably, some level of motivation or some need to sell their house, right? So we want to add these questions into our instant form, require them to fill out every one. And again, if they're willing to take the time to go through all of that just to, submit their information, then it's a decent chance that there, at minimum, there is some, motivation or want to sell their home. And another feature that Facebook allows us to implement into our lead forms is conditional logic. And I really, really like using conditional logic because, again, it's just another filter that we can, put all the prospects through to make sure that, we're actually, the leads that are coming through are actually leads that we can work, right? So conditional logic is basically, to give a quick example, if you ask the question of, is your home currently listed with an agent? You can put in a multiple choice question and, that the answer will be yes and no. If they answer yes, you can tell Facebook to say, hey, we're not going to be a good fit, and the lead will never come through. But if they say no, their home isn't currently listed with an agent, right? If they select no, then it'll push them on to the next question. And, you'll keep putting them through, the cycle of the qualifying questions that you're asking. But, this is a really cool feature because, you can make sure that, all the leads that are coming in are the correct property type, right? They're not listed with an agent, right? If there's other things that you require, or if you have maybe like a tight buy box that you're looking for, right? You can throw in questions about bathroom count, square footage, whatever, right? I've even seen people, add the timeline and disqualify everybody that's, looking to sell in, 3 months or more, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of customize it to filter out, the leads that you don't want. And ultimately, the only leads that will come through are the people that went through all of your qualifying questions, answered them all, and answered them all in a way that indicates, hey, this is a quality opportunity for us. And I think, layering that on top of the qualifying questions when using instant forms is a really, really good way to filter out tire kickers and make sure that the leads that are coming in are actually quality leads. And, a third thing that, I want to bring up is you can also, to take this even a step further, you can even require SMS verification for any leads that come through, right? So, once they click, submit on their, all of their information, Facebook will, shoot them a text, tell them to send back a code to verify that, they are, whatever information that they filled out is actually correct, right? And we typically don't do this. We typically don't keep that feature on just because it will increase your cost per lead some, because again, it's adding more friction. So the more friction you add, the more qualified the sellers will be, but the less volume that you'll have come through. And I don't typically have an issue with getting incorrect, phone numbers or contact information. So it's not something that I typically turn on, but if this is an issue that you have had, that's another option that you could turn on. And other than, adding those qualifying questions and using conditional logic, using the instant forms, another way that you can, add a healthy amount of friction to the process is to send all of your traffic to a landing page. And when I say a landing page, it's going to be like your company website, right? And, what this will look like is, they're on Instagram or Facebook scrolling, they come across your ad, they click on your ad. And when they click on your ad, it takes them to a, completely different website, right? It takes them off of Instagram, off of Facebook, whatever platform they're on, and it takes them to a landing page. Now they get to your landing page and, hopefully your landing page is optimized to convert leads, right? Not every landing page is optimized well to send traffic to. This is kind of why I prefer, I teach people to just use the instant forms with the qualifying questions because, I can't guarantee that everybody's landing page is going to be optimized. But anyways, when you send them to your landing page, you're adding more friction because you've taken them away from what they were previously doing, somewhere else, right? And now they have to go onto your website. They have to, find where to click to submit their information. And then they have to go in and submit all their information. They won't have the option to autofill their contact information, right? And, they'll have to answer, whatever questions that you're asking on your website, right? It's another option, but it's another way to add a healthy amount of friction to the process to, still have good leads coming in, a good volume of leads coming in, but eliminate the tire kickers, right? Because if it's a spam lead, or somebody that's just clicking around, just trying to do whatever with Facebook, right? Like, they probably won't take the time to actually leave the website, go through or leave the platform, go to your website, click through your website, submit all the information, right? So again, this is another way to filter out those tire kickers and make sure that the leads that are coming in are actually, quality leads. If you've run Facebook ads in the past and you got poor quality leads, like the reason that you were, generating poor quality leads typically isn't going to be Facebook's fault, right? It's typically something that was wrong with the structure of your ads, right? If you were targeting a wrong ad audience with your ads, that could be a big piece. And then, once they click on your ad, if it was ultimately too easy for them to give you submit their information, it's probably another big reason why a lot of your leads were just, poor quality, right? And again, the way to combat those two issues is to run targeted ads and make sure you're calling out one specific type of motivation in each ad that you're running. And then the second thing is to make sure you're adding friction to the process. So once they click on your ad, don't make it easy for them to submit their information, right? Because, if they're truly motivated, they'll fill out every question that you ask them. They'll jump through hoops to make sure that you get their contact information, right? But for those tire kickers or people that are just, messing around and being, submitting false information and just submitting spam into people aren't going to go through a lot of friction just to ultimately mess with you and fill out some information, right? So I think if you do those two things, that should drastically improve your lead quality, in terms of, hey, these are actual workable leads that we could take through a process and potentially get under contract and close. And, if you want to learn more about, some of these tips and tricks that we use and how we, structure our campaigns and how we create our ads, I do have a Skool community. The link's in the description below. And, we go through all of this stuff with Facebook and TikTok ads, right? From structuring the campaigns to managing the campaigns over time to little things like this to filter out, tire kickers and making sure you're getting, quality workable leads. We also provide access to $9 nationwide Facebook leads, $19 Facebook leads that are in major metros only. And then we have exclusive leads options as well. And, if any of these, pique your interest or, if you want, more quality leads or you want, some affordable leads that you can start working immediately as you learn how to, properly run Facebook ads and TikTok ads so that you can eventually take it over yourself. We have options for everybody. So again, the Skool community link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video and you thought it provided a lot of value, I would appreciate if you could throw a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and, we'll see you on the next one.